You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the MtG Cabal cast. And as you might guess, we're deciding to change the intro up for this episode. This week, we are talking about summer community events or seasonal community events, however you want to look at them. Sometimes they're cyclical, like we'll talk about. And this is the time of year that you have seen traditionally WotC be mown, summer doldrums, people are going on vacation. You need to try and drum up interest from your locals that have stayed and people that might be migrating into the area on vacation, and how to do that, how to pull these people back into your LGS. And up top, real quick, the one I'm going to talk about before I kick it over is something we already discussed. The Modern Horizons 3 set release at my store was pretty unique compared to years past. And on release weekend, they did on-demand drafts. I have never seen that before. They didn't even do it for the Lord of the Rings set. No on-demand draft. They just sold product. They did their pre-release, and they kind of called it there. It's not like they were shorted on product. There was more than enough to go around. But at that point in time, the set itself just kind of carried through. And the context of the game from a competitive standpoint wasn't where it necessarily was a year ago. We didn't have a lot of these RCQs to kind of bolster. And because of that, this infrequence of events, some of these would bring in more people. It offered the opportunity to have larger events once a quarter because that was the limit. Bring in more people, do more sales, more foot traffic, etc. for that. Some of the other games that were happening at the time, Lorcana was a month or two away, had drummed up of enough interest where my LGS kind of just coast through the summer like it had years previous. Modern Horizons 3 comes around. It's got the Eldrazi theme. People are super hype with it. It might not be a long tail product because Bloomburrow is coming up. So how do we just kind of like flash sale? All right, cool. We'll do the release set weekend immediately. Then we'll take a couple of weeks off. We'll have an RCQ in between. I think that happened shortly after. Yeah, weekend of, rather. That's Saturday. And then the next RCQ will be in July. And we'll sprinkle some events throughout, more so than we did last year. So that's kind of it immediately. That's the most unique change that I saw. The next community event I'll talk about after I kick it over, a little more, I think it's unique for this area, but not unique overall. It seems a little bit like what you guys kind of experience out in the Midwest. So seasonality, when it comes to summer or maybe summer-winter events, to try and bring people back into the store. Remind people that, hey, we're still the business. You have fun here. Come out, sling some cardboard. What goes on out there?
So there's actually one of the local neighborhoods here, and this is a shop I mention a lot, where its customer foot traffic is kind of beholden to the nearby university. That's where a lot of their pull and holds for their comics are.
Yep.
That's where a lot of their D&D players come from. That's where a lot of their Magic players come from. And incidentally, it happens to be in a neighborhood that has like its own business district and likes to put on events. Well, they have an ice carnival that they do twice a year. One is the week before Christmas. One is dead center of the summer in late June, early July. And it's literally just trying to get people, not just from that neighborhood, but from around the city out to that, because there's a bunch of restaurants that put on specials. Some of the dispensaries do special stuff. There's just a lot of reason for people to get out there. And it's a good way because the local store that's in that neighborhood helps sponsor it. They have a booth. They try to drum up what business they can because they recognize that neighborhood is vulnerable during those times when the students go away. And it's a lot of times just do something cool in the community that's going on. And then, hey, they do learn to plays basically to try to capture new customers who are willing to drive to the neighborhood. And it's something that, like, you know what? It gets new people in.
Yep.
It's free advertising because even just putting up the banner advertises your store to people walking by, and they may not come to your booth, but they may say, hey, I know that store. Maybe I'll go check it out next time. And it's just a really good way to get involved, not just with your captive audience. And I think that's one of the important things for stores to do when you have Your slower seasons, you should be advertising harder then to try to get new people, to try to get new business in there that you can depend on in off-peak season. Because sure, college kids, they're going to come in, they're going to spend their money. There's another store that's across from a high school. Their kids are going to walk over every day and spend their money. But there's still times where you're not going to have that easy foot traffic. And I think that's one of the best things that they can do, because it does get you involved. It gets you out there advertised, because those people may tell somebody else about it. And all of a sudden, well, it's a 20-minute drive, but I'll do it once a month to go pick up a new D&D book or something. And it's just really helpful that way.
Yeah. The store, my main LGS in Vermont used to do that, because there are so many community events in and around Burlington, Vermont, that it's very easy to extend their presence out into the community with various aspects, because they did everything from TT RPGs to board games and puzzles. Yeah. So to have an approachable booth was important to them, and something that they could do for the community and make the kind of the transient community know about them, because Burlington, Vermont is just constantly in flux. Every year there's a brand new crop of people that come in, and some of your regulars might leave. Yep. So you need to just kind of churn through that. Also, anecdotally, we went like 25 minutes north of us to go get breakfast one day, and we stumbled into the middle of a town where there was setting up to be like a little music fest. We got breakfast, came out, and all the vendors were set up. And there was an actual, I don't know what the proper name for a company like this is, but you could go there and just play board games and then buy what you want. It's not like a board game cafe, but it's like more like a board game club. And that was kind of their business model. So they weren't demoing Splunk. They were demoing this other old as dirt game where you basically like flick checkers towards a hole. And it's like been one of the biggest like Euro games for forever, because it's like 100 and some odd years old. It just keeps winning award after award. And people get really into hand making the board themselves. So you can buy some really upscale bougie versions of this thing, and it was just a blast to see a company like that come out. I never really seen a place that kind of ascribed to this like board game club thing just kind of make themselves known at a small community event like that. So yeah, that kind of outreach locally, like cherry, it's fantastic when you can. For me, the LGS that I have now, its community events are kind of like this one's going to be hard to read, so I won't even bring up the Instagram post, but there was Summer Luau is what they called it last weekend, and I was not able to attend. But it basically piggybacks on the fact that this is one of the premier stores to come out and play Magic at its oldest. So they ran, I think, CEDH on demands. Cool. And I didn't really hear about that because most of the players that I know that play CEDH were too busy playing in the team trios of Modern Legacy Vintage. 15 proxy vintage, 17 teams came out, so 51 players total in that event. And then there was also an old school event that ran at the same time. And I know there are some people in the area that are just dedicated to old school, but It seemed like there was a little too much draw for the team trios for old school to really kind of get going. That said, I think we have more middle school players than we do old school, so even then there might just not have been enough to actually fire a full 8-person old school event. But that's the kind of community stuff that we're looking at now as a community out here. Is we're looking to set ourselves apart from the competition, so to speak, because now the RCQ system is picked up. You get how many as a quarter? It's 2 a quarter now as a store.
Yeah.
Right. So that goes back to what I was saying before, which is when there was only one, and in region we have, or in region is the wrong way to phrase it. In driving distance, there are about 4 stores that have RCQs. So when there's 4 per quarter, that's pretty easy. That's like 1 every other weekish or something like that. Now that all those stores can have 2, that's 8 in a quarter, and that chews up a lot of weekends. So people want to have downtime between travel, they need time to prep for the next one, etc. Well, to stand out from stores that continue to have events focused in the RCQ formats on the weekend, ours is doing things like this. It also helps that Top Deck Games is owned by Nick Koss, who is the head, or rather the figurehead of Eternal Weekend. and who plays at the NYSE and is well known for also being kind of a pillar of that event. So people will come out for things like this. And now it seems like that's the direction that my LGS Top Deck Games is kind of driving towards from a Magic perspective. We're looking for stuff like that. Insofar as SWU and TTRPGs, it's just kind of the same thing. They run their standard events. I think like maybe once a month there's a big TTRPG event in the store, like large enough that teams come out to play, like people with shirts, like bowling shirts, it seems is kind of the go-to for TTRPGs, to just come out and represent. And I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen crews, teams, whatever you want to call them, come out and play like Warhammer in a tournament event like that. It's always been people coming out for fun to the LGS and spending a day there.
Yeah.
But our store is making a big enough footprint, or making a big enough note of that. We're not really a fab store. We have fab events, so I don't think they have armories or whatever, just kind of like Monday night fab, kind of like F&M, but on Monday, whatever you want to call it. And so we're trying to be this like standout organizer. We had a vintage event last summer. I think the Luau kind of replaced that, and they're just trying to find their niche and remind people like, hey, if you want to come out and you want to play these older forms of Magic, why don't you come out here? And after every one of those, people are apt to sell to the store, and I know that because we keep getting Slaved Power or Beta Power or Foreign Duels into our store cases. So people are actively moving cards from collections to the case for the foils or foreign stuff that we have, whatever it is. So not only is it actually doing what it's intending to, which is bring an underserved community together, and I don't want people to think that I mean like some like actual underserved of the community, because these are all privileged human beings, but like as a format, vintage is underserved. Those kind of people out and like, hey, you can come play your cards here. It is going to be your friendly environment for that. And it is succeeding, and I think that's really neat to see, while others are trying sometimes to just stay above water. They, with running events that are RCQ in season or fab in season, etc., our LGS is able to say like, all right, cool, we're going to be gonzo about the summer, and we're just going to do some really weird shit. Here you go. And that is also bringing together an incredible part of like various communities.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things is there's two different ways you can go about these events, and one is to engage with your community, and one is to try to engage with a new community. And I think it's important to do both.
Yeah,
you need to, because if you only do it for new people, your entrenched customer base starts to feel a little bit alienated. And that's touching on that. Unless you had more, there's actually another store here that does. It's kind of a like store champs thing on its own. They do basically quarterly events for Magic, but they also do Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And then they have during the summer a championship weekend. And basically what it is if you win any of their quarterly events, you get free entry into the big championship. And it's 3 days and one event per day, or one game per day. Magic one day, Yu-Gi-Oh! One day, Pokemon one day. And it's literally come in, play. It's a 1 to 3K depending on attendance. And the winner gets a championship belt in the mat, which is just pretty cool. The belt alone is enough. But it's a way for them to engage with their active player base. And one of the really interesting things is that they did it one year, or one quarter earlier this year. They did it for their RCQ. And it was actually someone from about 3 hours away that got a free entry into their 3K and didn't need to queue. So when it happens, he's going to come up and he's going to play. And it's just really cool to see that not only incentivize your local players to not necessarily choose your store over others, but depending on how many stores you have in your area, there's times where there can be 3 RCQs on one day. And you have to choose. And that is terrible. Because if all of the good players go to the same RCQ, then you have a much harder time than if you go to one of the others if you're trying to queue for the tournament. And this is a way to kind of get people to choose yours maybe a little bit over that. Or if there's 3 that they can drive to, if they're driving a long distance, well, let's try yours because there's extra incentive there. And it's just really nice to have the community like, it doesn't mean anything. There's nobody collecting, I don't know, gaming, etc. top 8 store showdown cards, but it's still nice to have, I won store championships in 2024 on a belt for Yu-Gi-Oh, for Magic, for Pokemon. And then you've got your multi-game guys who can potentially get 2 to 3 belts every year. But it's just a really cool way to basically kind of incentivize an event loyalty program that doesn't necessarily mean discounting product or anything like that, because the hype is enough. I get to have my picture taken holding the belt, biting the belt, whatever. And I get it posted on social media by the store.
Yeah.
So now anyone that follows it knows, oh, that's great. Been awesome. I get my picture up. People can see it. I'm a champ. It's just a really good feel. And it's one of those things that doesn't cost the store a whole lot of time and energy or money, and can potentially lead to a huge return. For the last 2 years, every one of those has been at least a 3K based on attendance, and that's just with a $50 entry.
Yeah.
Or 25 rather, sorry. So that's really good. And to be able to consistently have that and rely on that when sales are typically slower, because they time it for the summer, which is a downtime because of schools. It happens. But it gives them a flagship weekend where they can say, you know what, this is basically like our Black Friday in June.
Yeah.
Where we get to say this weekend, we can reliably do $15,000 in sales every day. Great. That can make a year. And that's something that I think a lot of stores should take advantage of. And the thing that I think is key, and this is something that this store did, is they actually approached other stores and said, we want to do this thing in the area. How can we not conflict with your big summer events?
Yep. Yeah.
And plan around that.
I'm glad you called that out, because that's something I was thinking of, was like, if you're going to do your own champs events, you have the freedom to do it whenever you want. So the best thing you can do is to make sure that you are working with the other stores in the area to not work against the other stores in the area.
Exactly. And that's, there's a few stores here that are really good at that, and they're one of them. And I think that's the key thing, because then it enables you to have your own thing, not at the cost of your other LGSs, and to work in tandem with them, because then they can say, oh man, this system works. We want to do something like this now for our stuff. Actually, the local mini store has started doing quarterly events for it, and they're the only store in the area that does minis. And they started doing it because they saw this model and were like, oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
We can get people in, we can have retention, and we can get people from other areas in. And sure, they may only come out once a quarter or once a year, but they're probably going to spend some money here, because that's usually how the travel gamers are. Is I travel to this place, I drove 3 hours, let me spend like $5 to $10 here. Or in the case of Warhammer, $50 to $150 here. But and it's just, that's the thing that I think is key to it, is working with those other stores and saying, hey, we're not trying to cannibalize your RCQs. We're not trying to cannibalize pre-releases or anything else, whatever games you were in. We do not want to interfere overly. And obviously, sometimes it's just not going to work out, and you're going to have the event on top of someone. Everyone understands that. As long as you're doing your due diligence and trying not to schedule on top of someone else, most everyone's okay with it, I've found.
Yeah, the popularity of 1 in 5Ks in this area should not be understated, to the point where there was one weekend where 3 out of the 4 drivable stores had 1Ks, I think, on the same weekend. And it was just kind of this showing that they will work with each other for large enough events, but they don't see 1Ks as being large enough to actually work together and make sure they're not scheduling over one another for the same formats, which is really funny, because for some people, 1Ks are fantastic. They'll go out, they'll show up for a 1K, they'll drive an amount of time, like an hour or two for a 1K, like it's a reliable drive for a reliable amount of money. Sure, go for it. Yeah. But we're all within an hour or two. And so it was kind of funny to see people just slowly realizing over the couple weeks after the first one, they're like, wait a minute, the next one's on that weekend? Wait a minute, the third one's also on that weekend? Who's not talking to who? And at the end of the day, it's just whatever. We know we'll cap. Every store knows they're going to cap, so they just fire it off. And I guess it's also kind of being in the shadow of multiple metropolitan areas like you guys are. St. Louis is huge, but for events of a certain size, people will drive down from Chicago or drive up from wherever, right?
Yeah, and I mean, one of the nice things is like there's so many large metropolitan areas within 4 hours. So depending on the game, I mean, look, we have a 1K for the Final Fantasy card game down here. We get 20 to 30 people from Chicago and Milwaukee that drive down for the event.
Yeah.
Because they just don't have events. And, you know, big Magic events, you hit 1 to 3K, you'll get up to 4 hours. Kansas City, Chicago, Indianapolis, Nashville, all within 4 to 6 hours. And you'll get people coming in. So it's that similar to you. You know, there's enough 1Ks in a weekend, you know you're going to fire. Because people will show up to one and then just go to the next if it's full, and on to the next if it's full. And we do pull like that here. And that's one of the nice things to have is, you know, a regionality to it almost. Because as some of our listeners may not know, Grand Prix used to be held regionally, and it was like Pastimes does this area, Star City does this area, Channel does here, Legion does here. There were all these event companies, and it kind of makes it feel like that when you have a store event like that annual championship where, oh, this is pulling in like the grinder scene from within 4 hours.
Yeah, for our region, I think the notable standouts are whenever you can hold. Legacy is kind of old hat. It's vintage that I think is what like we're learning in region gets the pull, gets people to drive. NYSE trials were huge. Yeah. I didn't know a lot of the names of the players in the event, but come to watch a stream, I found out that they are just like the eternal grinder, no pun intended, that were just driving straight out of New York City down to basically a Philly suburb to play in a trial to not have to pay a $500 entry fee, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is about this year that's really kind of turning the event space into one focused on vintage to make these events more popular. And if I had to guess, I'll probably see a couple of them uses these in this area for like the doldrum events where it's just like, okay, we know we can be gonzo about it, so let's just go be gonzo. And every one of these vintage events allows 15 proxy, which is the most popular way to play vintage, no matter how you slice it, outside of, or even in the largest event in a given year in NYSE. And people are becoming more apt to want to play vintage like that, or just vintage in general. So I think that's going to be our kind of keystone for these community events moving forward. I think that's kind of what we're learning down here is you can do that, you can do it reliably, and you'll draw enough to most likely cap your event.
Yeah.
Anything else before we cut into picks?
No, but I'm going to go first because mine ties into yours.
That is correct.
Kind of. I am picking the bane of modern formats everywhere, Nadu. This card just tore it up. It was everywhere. It's everywhere in the 5-0s. It's everywhere in the challenges. This card is going to get banned. Sure. I am going to say that I am picking this with the knowledge it is getting banned because there will be time where it is still legal because they will ban around the card first. Why am I assuming that? Because of Hogak. Because for those of you that remember and were playing back then, Hogak, while alive for a very brief time, was a card that everybody knew should be banned, and instead of banning it, they banned around it first. It was like Ensnaring Bridge, I think, or Bridge from Below was a couple months after, and then eventually they said, all right, we're going to go ahead and get it. Well, the thing is, we know when our next ban announcement is, and that is August.
Yes. Until
then, Nadu, and we can take a look at the Hogak graph to see this, based on what happened to Hogak, it just went up, 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 and then it came back down. But we haven't reached that yet with Nadu. Not only that, Nadu, frankly, has significantly more EDH implications. And this is a card that I could see long-term supplanting Thrasios as like your de facto version of this effect, because of Shaco, because of Lightning Greaves. I also think that the first thing they're going to hit, speaking of, is Shaco. Shuko, sorry. But then, guess what? Immediately, Lightning Greaves slides into that spot. Some people are already running in their lists. Mm-hmm. And I think that, given the timeline for Hogak, when we just had ban announcements on a whim, not just scheduled out, and the fact that Wizards said that they have seen healthy development in the format to try to deal with Nadu, I think we are a ways away from a Nadu ban. And I think when the next ban announcement hits and Nadu does not get hit, that's when we see the surge kind of like what we saw in Hogak. Now, that said, this card is going to get banned. So, We are buying in now when it is cheap at about 10 to 15. I think I have 22 on the way because someone said they didn't have 2 when I ordered a play set, so I ended up with 22 instead of or no, I ended up with 1 extra. Sorry. But we're going to sell when that ban announcement hits, and it doesn't get hit in the announcement, because I don't expect that to happen in August. I think it's the 3rd week, so keep an eye out. Obviously, there's going to be some ridiculous data mine or something that's going to reveal like JIT's getting unbanned or something, and then it doesn't. Don't pay attention to that. But when that doesn't happen, Nadu won't necessarily go from a quarter to $20. You're not going to see a 10,000x, but I could certainly see it tripling or quadrupling in price from where it is now.
Yep.
And that's why I think we pick this, because even if it gets banned around and we lose Shuko, there are cards very similar, be it Swiftfoot Boots, be it Lightning Greaves, that can slide in with a 0 equip cost and still get you the same effect. You still put your entire deck into your hand. You can still do it. It's just a turn slower, which is fine. And that's when we want to sell and get into.
Yep. I've seen Nadu and CEDH already. So you mentioned it replacing Vasios.
Yep.
I've seen that deck. I think it's won every EDH pod I've seen on Monday nights. It is extremely powerful, and the other 3 players in the pod dislike playing against it because it's not that the pilots are bad. It's just that the deck is slow. It is difficult to interact with, and it basically is a time thief from the rest of the players as far as CEDH goes. But the fact that it generally wins the turn it goes off is fantastic. It means you're pretty much set up to just play the next blue farm.
Yep.
That said, it uses all parts of the buffalo in regards to combo pieces and ways to combo out. So you are running not just Springheart and Tuco, but you're also running Scoot, Swarm from Zendikar Resurgent. Yep. You are still running Sylvan Safekeeper. You have Shuko and Greaves and every Encore, etc. Or you can't run the Encores. You're running the Octopus, the Cephalid, Illusionist.
Illusionist, yes.
So you can just go through your deck, put it in your graveyard, in your hand, and then dump out the Thassa's Oracle. You can still run Field of the Dead. Legacy is currently figuring this deck out as well. That is a format where Field of the Dead is still legal. Do you want it in the main? Do you want it in the sideboard? Do you want to play Breakfast? Do you want to play... That's the Illusionist Encore combo. With Thoracle, do you want to play a Stoneblade variant? We're still working on that one, but either way, Nadu is starting to put up results in Legacy. You don't draw the card, you put it in your hand, so it gets around Bowmasters, which further cements the fact that Bowmasters falling out of the Legacy format is just kind of the next evolution of the format. We'd already been making a swap from Bowmaster to Dothy Voidwalker for the various Reanimator decks. It's a better mid-range creature overall. It helps fight various parts of the format that aren't just the spell Reanimate. It fights Uro. It fights the Beans decks pretty well. And so Nadu is already insulated against Bowmasters if we were to make the swap back. At the end of the day, I do expect Nadu to get removed from the format. But between now and August, we also have the Star City in Baltimore at the end of July. Then after that, we also have the various events at Gen Con that are, I think there are a ton of Legacy. I would assume there's some Modern there, but I have not looked at the schedule yet. So there's
there's some of each there.
So like the Secret Lair Showdown is is in Legacy, and there's a lot of pressure on WotC from the Legacy community to review the ban and restrict list, because despite what WotC wants to tell you, there are relevant Legacy events between now and August, and they are premier Legacy events as far as like the calendar year is concerned, and the Star City coming up and anything at Gen Con is also a premier level event. So you have the opportunity to do this kind of stuff. But we'll talk more about that next week. The card I'm looking at, the one you alluded to this week, is Lightning Greaves. But more for a commander standpoint than a constructed standpoint. So Lightning Greaves specifically from Commander Masters. And if you think back to like several years ago, we did talk about Lightning Greaves from F&M. This was a look that you made, which I think was good then, still good now. But at the time, It was the only way to acquire Lightning Greaves in this art. Now we have a couple since that pick, so it is a little bit of a rub. And the one thing that we do want to note about Lightning Greaves is basically that the price on the Commander Masters one is a frozen rope. It's just straight $5 all day long. It's just a bill, not a problem. That actually means that any Lightning Greaves priced below this until now all kind of rose up as well. So Lightning Greaves is basically just a $5 card all day long. When I took my notes, CK had 20 in stock for $7. They were buying 12 at $3. And it looks like they might have just sated their demand for other copies of Lightning Greaves because the CM version, they only received one, but their buy price has been cut in half to $1.50. So that's kind of a crap. As far as TCG Player is concerned, there were 287 listings at LP or better for a market of $5.11. There's 275 listings left, and the market is basically the same. And I took my notes only a couple of days ago, so it's really weird that Card Kingdom half their price, but TCG is still seeing a bit of an increase. I put these on my watch list in October of 2023, 2 months after they dropped from Commander Masters. CK was buying 301 copies at $4.25. They had 20 in stock at $7, so the same amount at the same price in terms of retail. And there were 209 listings on TCG Player for $5.11. So again, it's just basically just goes to show the Lightning Greaves is a frozen rope. Now, when it comes to the card itself, in terms of Commander, this is really good at doing one specific thing, and that's giving one specific creature haste and shroud. That's it. That's what the card does, because that's literally what the card does. It just also has an equip cost of 0. Now, to go back and look at Lightning Greaves in various formats, when it comes to Modern, there were 2 Nadu lists in the top 23 of PT Modern Horizons or Mythic Champion, whatever the hell they are, Mythic Championship. Modern Horizons 3, that featured Greaves in the main, which can give us a little bit of a lift on top of the Commander playability. So it all depends on what flavor of Nadu you want to play, but this could be the third way, the third unique way to trigger Nadu. You have Shuko, you can play Greaves, and you can play Outrider Encore, which is the 3 mana value Encore that has the Encore ability of 0 mana, prevent the next 1 damage to target the Delta target creature. The benefit of the Outrider compared to Greaves is that you can chord for it. You can tutor it up, basically. The benefit of Shuko over Greaves is that you can find it with Urza Saga. So Greaves is this kind of really weird spot for the deck where you just kind of have to natty draw it. There you can't really search for it, but it makes it very difficult to kind of pithing needle 1 or 2 of the solutions to the problem when you can in fact have 3. And the more people dig deeper, the more they'll probably find other options, but none is really going to be better than these 3. Greaves, also, like I said, haste kind of irrelevant in the deck. You're not attacking with one giant creature. You're going to be attacking with a lot of little things, or you're going to be casting Thassa's Oracle. Importantly is the Shroud, because you can leave it in Nadu, and then it can't be targeted. You can't fry it, you can't Fatal Push it, you can't path it, nothing. It just kind of exists. So there could be a chance that if the Modern format kind of changes a little bit, we see a little more targeted removal, then Lightning Greaves also gets a bump in playability. But we won't really know that until either we get results from larger events like the Star Cities or Energies that are coming up, or the Moto API is restored.
Yeah.
Because we've been without that for almost a month now, and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass. When we look at in Commander, this is in over 1 million decks of the 4 million decks on rec. So 25% of all the decks on rec play this card.
Does Sol Ring have that level of incorporation?
I would assume so, because at least Sol Ring is in every precon.
That's fair, yeah.
And
not anymore.
That's fair. And I'll bring this up now, and I'll say it again later. Boots is in 1 precon a year. It's not in every precon, but it's at least it feels like it's in at least 1 precon a year. There might be some years where there aren't boots at all, but we almost always get a yearly printing of this card, and that's why places, vendors effectively can cut back on this card really quickly. And I'll get to that on a timeline, etc. But when we look at going back to Commander, we can see this used in any deck that relies on creatures to close out the game in any capacity. Do you need your Commander or a specific creature to have haste so they can tap the turn they enter the battlefield? Greaves has got you. Do you want to protect a combo piece, a value piece, a lock piece, anything else across multiple turns? Greaves has got you. Do you just want to make your creatures more difficult to interact with, even for you? Greaves has got you. It does a lot of really cool things, including stuffing your own ability to target your own creatures because Shroud is not hexproof, which is also really important.
Yes.
But the 0 equip cost really does keep Greaves in the running for one of the best pieces of agnostic equipment available to us as players of Commander. And basically, it's like the 3 pairs of boots that are this kind of interchangeable. You have Lightning Greaves, cost 0 to equip, gives Shroud. Swiftfoot boots, also Shroud and haste. Swiftfoot boots gives haste and hexproof, but has an equip cost of 1. Notably, Greaves is 2 and 0. Swiftfoot boots is 1 and 1, and then Lava Spur boots gives haste and ward, and also is 1 and 1. So they all are kind of like iterating off of Greaves. And that's kind of like what all our pairs of shoes do. Some of them give double strike. Some of them give non-basic land walking. But the more you look into pairs of shoes in this game, they all kind of are just spin-offs of Lightning Greaves. And trying to, like, it's not lightning in a bottle. I think Swiftfoot Boots might actually be better than Lightning Greaves in most instances. But Greaves is just, like, so difficult to interact with once
it's the
they're
standard.
on the board. Yeah. Not being tutorable by Urza Saga does hurt it, like I mentioned before, compared to Swiftfoot Boots or Lava Spur Boots. But with the Equip 0 is just so good. It's so overpowering. Timeline-wise, these churn at about 30 copies a day across LP or near mint when looking at the Commander Masters variant. The Gaming Code Direct, unsurprisingly, has an anchor of 503 at market price, and MTG Decks and More also has an anchor of 358, though they are 8% over market. And this is like the third or the fourth one of these cards in a row where I've noticed the Gaming Co. is at market. And if you watch whatever algorithms they run on a daily basis, just reprice their bricks like this to market price. That's their algo. They just always market, always market, always market. I think there's a card I was looking at last week where they were market when I picked it and I took my notes, and then a couple of days later it had gone up in price, and the Gaming Co. met market price. They're just like right there. That does make it a little bit difficult to get through, though. It's going to take over 3 months to see any kind of profit flipping this back into TCG Player. But once that happens, we'll see immediately 20% profit. So that means it's going to be like $6-7 card in about 3 months. Bylist most likely won't be an exit point for Greaves, as it's printed so often in Commander decks that they can open up nigh infinite on their buy lists and restock rather easily, because people are just going to type in Lightning Greaves, and just like TCG Player, your vendor is going to serve all copies of Greaves, and they all cost the same except for the F&M version. So people are just going to buy Greaves. So when you have a buy list like this, you can just be really agnostic about Greaves and just say all of them at this price. And people are just going to send you Greaves because they keep getting printed like once a year. So from a vendor perspective, it's very easy for them to just vacuum up Lightning Greaves and other cards like this that come out in every like Commander deck or like every year in a Commander deck. So we'll just never out to buy list. This is going to be a TCG Player flip in about 3 months. Reprint equity, I've mentioned it a couple times now. It feels like we got a pair of boots in at least one Commander deck with each set. Looking back at this, we have like Baldur's Gate, AFR, which is cool, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Streets of New Capenna. Let's see, what else? The Doctor Who stuff. So maybe it's not like every standard set, but it's like I said, one standard set a year. Or maybe it's the Master set in a year, because we just had the Doctor Who stuff, the Lord of the Rings stuff, and Commander Masters. Like those were all the same year, I think. So like we got 3 copies of boots in Commander decks in 1 year. Like that's why vendors can just suck them all up at relative ease. Buy quantity on boots. I have about a dozen of these from playing Mirrored and Standard and various collection buys, because like you, I'm an old head at this game, and I don't need to buy anymore, and I'd recommend not throwing more than like $80 to $100 at these. This is a midterm spec, so that is kind of a long time to hold like 20 or so of these cards. So parking money for that long on this many cards might not work for everyone, especially when moving them in trade is going to be pretty flat for a really long time. If you wanted to try and like arbitrage some like low-hanging fruit specs into Lightning Greaves, selling those for profit and buying into Greaves and like moving them up and up and up into other specs that'll hold a little bit longer, that'll churn a little bit faster, like I could recommend that. But buying in 20 plus copies of Greaves, probably not really where you want to be, unless you're really confident in just throwing these on TCG Player and letting them sit there for the 3+ months. Direct buy on these is, I think, a little bit higher than everything else. So if you've got TCG Player Direct, you can probably list these for like 6 or 7 right now, and they'll probably just churn really quickly. So, in essence, free money. But a lot of making profit from this card is going to be paying attention to specifically those 2 anchors in the Gaming Co. and MTG Decks and more. Once those get chewed up, or they move higher than market, then you're going to be able to start flipping for a decent price. Until then, we're kind of like stuck here. But Greaves is not a bad card I would to be stuck in. I just don't think it's going to be a good hold for like 6 months to a year, because we know we're going to get more Greaves down the line. So get in 3 months, get out. I think that's a perfectly fine timeline. We're not really going to lose much on these in a reprint, but it's just going to become a lot of noise, because the next reprint means more options to buy, and that's going to make it more difficult for you to get visibility on your copies compared to what's currently in market. So I would look at Greaves as an option, but not a long-term, just a midterm flip.
Yeah, Greaves is one of those cards that for me, it's just always like, and everybody has it basically, that grinds trade floors. You've got either the deck box filled with your $3 to $7 uncommons, or the 4 pocket filled with your copies of like Lightning Greaves, used to be Path to Exile, stuff like that, where It's like people need this and it's good to finish out a trade. And Greaves has always been one of those that's been in that, like, it's been in that binder for me. It's one that I just don't mind ever having extra of. And like looking at all of the versions on TCG Player, every single one is $5 except the Commander Masters, the Commander 2020, the Commander 19. All of them should be $5 or more. This is one that it's like Sol Ring. It's just got a perpetual price tag in mind, and it has a perpetual liquidity, because again, 25% of the decks on EDH Rec is insane.
Yeah.
Adoption for this card.
Yeah.
So you never, like, sure, liquidity might not be great, but you'll always have a guy to get offloaded to. Someone will always need this, and like a random sampling of 20 players at an event.
Yeah.
So you'll get rid of it. It's not something that I would necessarily be super concerned about sitting on. Maybe, like you said, 20 to 30 copies I would be concerned about. But if I'm in it for like 4 to 5 copies, this is one that I think people should just always have. And when there are copies, because most people don't care about the version. But when there's versions that are less than $5, you should pick them up, because they will be 5 or more eventually. Just guaranteed.
I think the call out to Sol Ring is actually really important, and it's something I forgot about, because it's not something I did, because I never owned an LGS or had case space. But when you can buy Sol Rings for wicked cheap, like at buy list price, and put them in your case for under market, they will churn. Even at market, they will churn based on the number of players that want them. So you always have them in your case at events, your case at your LGS. When you can do that with Lightning Greaves, when you can buy at buy list value and list them back for market or under market, they will always churn. So if your method of finance on this card isn't just buying from TCG Player, it's going to be buying from locals at buy list value, then all day long. And I think this serves as a really good lesson. Like that's why I think the Sol Ring call out is so powerful here, because sure, you get it in every deck, but it's also so cheap that people don't mind spending money on a Sol Ring so they could have one in every deck. Just like Lightning Greaves.
I can't tell you how many times I was like, I must have misplaced the Sol Ring for this deck, and just bought one.
Yeah.
And have done the same thing with Lightning Greaves, because I was like, well, shit, I need it for the deck. And when you have that out, you're right. It's incredibly powerful. There's a vendor at events. I won't call them out because this isn't the best practice, but it works for them. And I actually think it's a good one. They put Sol Rings in their case for $5. They put Lightning Greaves in their case for $5. Because if you're at an event, no vendor brought those.
It's true. Yeah.
You'll pay $5 to get that Sol Ring, even though you know it's only $1, because guess what? It's idiot everywhere. Tax. I forgot I needed this card. And I think it's a really good call out for that, in addition to all of the other reasons you cited. It's just, how the hell is there a version that's under $5? Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah. So I guess we'll at that point linger, which is just if you can get in at buy list, if that is a method available to you, get in at buy list and just even churn them at market because they will just move. They will move easily. They will move quickly. This is just kind of a card that is not underserved by the community. The community writ large knows about this card. Obviously, based on the numbers, it's not just people who buy the precons. This is just a card that's not really glitzy. It's not glamorous. It just does the job, and it's going to do it in multiple formats moving forward. This is anecdotal. I pooped myself a little bit when my Rakdos Painter opponent played Lightning Greaves one time because I had no idea how I was going to deal with that card.
A friend of mine runs it in his painter list. He says it's the best card in the deck.
Yeah. He chose not to play Lava Spur Boots because the equip cost on Lava Spur Boots in that deck can be pretty intimidating compared to 0. And it was very difficult to deal with that, especially when it goes on something like a Chaos Defiler and it's just beating you for 5. Like, you have to remember that it becomes a game about juggling hats, Affinity in Modern. And it has, like Lightning Greaves has very real ramifications in multiple constructed formats. It's not the prettiest card, so it doesn't go everywhere in constructed, never was, but it definitely has a home. And if you have the opportunity to buy it on the cheap, you should. And that's the last thing I'll say. So unless you've got anything else about picks or anything you remembered that you do during the summer, we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. If you want to reach us on Twitter, I am at Halt, I am Reptar. You are?
At Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.